The guard almost walked past the door. It was just another quiet night on death row. Lights hummed. Cameras blinked. Nothing ever changed here. But this door was wrong. No nameplate. No number. Just gray steel and a tiny scratch across the lock. Fresh. He leaned closer. Inside, someone was whispering. Not crying. Not praying. Talking. To someone who wasn't there. He froze. Because the woman inside that cell had not spoken in 8 years. The guard slowly raised his radio, then stopped. From inside the cell, the woman spoke again. Tell them I'm ready now. Silence. Then she laughed. A calm, patient laugh. The guard stepped back, heart racing, and finally called it in. But when officers opened the cell 1 minute later, she was sitting perfectly still on her bed, hands folded, eyes closed. And the security camera showed no movement. Not a single frame. Yet the microphone clearly recorded a second voice answering her. And that voice sounded like a child. 16 years earlier. Before the prison. Before the trial. Before America learned her name. People in the neighborhood called her Miss Evelyn. She lived in a clean white house at the end of a quiet street where nothing ever happened. Children rode bikes. Dogs slept on lawns. Every evening smelled like dinner. Evelyn Hart baked pies for neighbors. She volunteered at the church library. She never raised her voice. If you asked anyone on that street, they would say the same thing. She's the kindest woman you'll ever meet. And that was exactly the problem. Because detectives later learned something simple about danger. It rarely looks dangerous. Evelyn moved there with her husband Daniel and their daughter Lily. Daniel worked long hours. He smiled often but spoke little. The neighbors barely noticed him. Lily was 7 years old. She was quiet. Too quiet, teachers said. But polite. Perfect manners. Perfect grades. Perfect silence. The school counselor wrote a note once. Child shows signs of fear but refuses to explain why. Nothing came from it. Children are shy sometimes. Life moved on. Then the pets started disappearing. First a cat, then a dog, then another cat. No one connected it at first. Neighborhoods lose pets all the time. Posters went up. Rain washed them away. But one boy, Marcus, noticed something strange. Every time an animal vanished. Evelyn baked something the next day. Cookies, pies, casseroles. She delivered them door to door with a warm smile. Marcus told his mother. His mother told him to stop imagining things. He stopped talking about it. Months passed. Then came the first call to police. A late-night noise complaint. A neighbor heard someone singing in Evelyn's basement at 2 a.m. Officers knocked. Evelyn answered in her robe, calm and confused. There must be a mistake, she said gently. They checked the house. Everything spotless. No one downstairs. No sign of anything wrong. They apologized and left. As the patrol car pulled away, the younger officer looked back. Through the basement window. He thought he saw a small hand press against the glass. But when he blinked, nothing was there. He never wrote it in the report. 2 years later, Daniel disappeared. Not missing. Just gone. His job reported he never returned from lunch break. His car was found in a grocery parking lot. Wallet inside. Phone inside. No struggle. No witnesses. Evelyn cooperated fully. She cried softly. Answered every question. Passed every test. Investigators had no evidence of a crime. They called it a voluntary disappearance. Case closed. But Lily stopped speaking after that day. Not a single word for 3 months. When she finally spoke again, she told a teacher one sentence. Daddy went where the quiet people go. The teacher asked what that meant. Lily said she didn't remember. Years passed. The house stayed perfect. Evelyn stayed kind. Lily grew older but never invited friends over. No one thought much about it anymore. Until the storm. The power went out across the neighborhood during a heavy summer storm. Police received dozens of calls. One of them came from Marcus, now 16. He reported hearing someone screaming from Evelyn's backyard. Officers responded immediately. Rain poured. Flashlights shook across fences. The backyard gate was locked, but the shed door was open. Inside the shed was nothing unusual. Tools, boxes, gardening supplies. Then lightning struck nearby, and for 1 second the yard lit up bright as day. And the officer saw it. Fresh soil. A long stretch of turned earth behind the shed. Too neat. Too straight. He called it in. Evelyn stepped outside moments later, holding an umbrella. Her voice calm. Officers, is something wrong? They asked about the digging. She smiled politely. Just planting a garden. At midnight. During a storm. They requested permission to check. She agreed immediately. Always cooperative. Always calm. They pushed shovels into the ground. 5 inches down, they hit wood. Not a coffin. A door. A flat wooden hatch buried under the yard. The officers opened it. A ladder descended into darkness. And from below, they heard breathing. Inside was a hidden room. Clean. Prepared. And in the corner sat a small mattress. Blankets folded perfectly. No person inside. But on the wall were markings. Hundreds of small lines scratched carefully, like someone counting days. In the center of the room stood a single chair facing the wall. And on that wall, children's drawings. Dozens of them, all drawn in the same shaky style. Every picture showed the same thing. A house, a woman, and a door with no handle. The officers turned slowly toward Evelyn. She stood at the top of the ladder watching them, still smiling. Then she asked a question that changed everything. Did she leave? The trial would later last 11 weeks. The country watched. Experts argued. Psychologists disagreed. No one could explain how one person could live two completely different lives so perfectly. Neighbors testified. Teachers testified. Detectives testified. But the most important testimony never happened. Because Lily refused to speak again. Not once. Not even in court. She only wrote 3 words on a piece of paper and slid it to the judge. The courtroom went silent. Even the reporters stopped typing. The judge read it. His hands trembled. He did not read it out loud. He sealed it immediately. And from that moment forward, Evelyn Hart stopped defending herself. She accepted the verdict without reaction. Guilty. Sentence. Death. Back in the present. The prison hallway remained silent after the strange recording. Technicians replayed the audio again and again. 2 voices. Clear as day. The second voice was matched against every inmate in the facility. No match. They enhanced it. Cleaned the noise. Slowed it down. The child's voice said, "You promised you wouldn't forget me." The guard who first heard it refused to work that wing again. 3 days later, the warden reviewed Lily's sealed statement for the first time since the trial. Authorization required. Witness present. The envelope opened after 16 years. Inside was 1 sheet of paper. In careful handwriting. "She still thinks I'm downstairs." The warden looked up slowly toward the death row corridor. At that exact moment, every camera in Evelyn Hart's hallway went black. The cameras went black, and no alarm sounded. At first, the control room staff thought it was just another electrical glitch. Old buildings fail sometimes. Wires age. Systems freeze. But only one hallway lost power. Death row, Section C. Every other camera in the prison worked perfectly. A technician tried resetting the feed. Nothing. He switched monitors. Still nothing. Then, the audio came on by itself. Soft breathing. Slow, steady, patient breathing. It was coming from Evelyn Hart's cell. The control room fell silent. No one had touched the speakers. No one had pressed play. Yet the sound continued. Then came a second voice. A child's voice. "Are you coming down today?" A chair scraped loudly across concrete. Guards in the room stared at each other, confused. Because they all knew something impossible. Evelyn's cell had no loose furniture. The emergency team reached the hallway in under 30 seconds. The lights worked. The doors were locked. Nothing was broken. Everything seemed normal. Except for cell 12. The small observation window was covered from the inside. Not blocked, but covered, as if someone had carefully placed paper over the glass. A guard slid the panel open. "Evelyn." No response. He unlocked the door, and the heavy metal groaned as it swung open. Inside, Evelyn sat on the floor, facing the wall. Not the bed, not the door, but the wall. Her hands rested gently on her knees. And drawn across the concrete in dark pencil lines were hundreds of small tally marks. They were fresh. They were not there during the morning inspection. The guard stepped closer. "Where did you get this?" She didn't turn around. She just whispered softly, "You opened it again." The guard frowned. "Opened what?" There was a long pause. Then Evelyn finally looked back at him and smiled the same calm, disarming smile her neighbors had once trusted. The basement. The warden ordered a full search of the cell. They found no pencil, no tool, no contraband. Nothing that could make marks on concrete. Yet the lines were real. Each one was clean, careful, and deliberate. And they were grouped in sets of 7. 7 days? 7 years? 7 what? The prison psychologist was called in immediately. Evelyn had refused therapy for over a decade, but this time, she agreed to talk. She sat across the table, hands folded neatly in her lap. The psychologist began gently. "Do you remember your daughter, Lily?" Evelyn's eyes softened. Yes. Where is she now? Evelyn answered without hesitation. Downstairs. The psychologist kept his voice steady. You mean the room under your old house? Evelyn tilted her head slightly. No. Under here. The psychologist stopped writing. Under the prison? She nodded. She doesn't like the dark. I visit so she won't be lonely. The recording ended there. Because at that moment, every light in the interview room flickered and went out. The building's generator activated seconds later, but security logs showed something strange. The power never failed. There was no outage, no overload. The lights had simply shut off, as if someone had flipped a switch that didn't exist. Meanwhile, investigators reopened the original case files. 16 years had passed, and technology had improved. Details once ignored now mattered. They re-examined the underground room found behind a wall in Evelyn's old house. The measurements were wrong. The blueprint of the property showed no space for that chamber. It wasn't just hidden or sealed off, it was impossible. According to the architectural plans, solid earth and foundation should have been there. Yet photographs clearly showed a constructed room. Someone had built it, or something had been removed to make space for it. The lead investigator stared at the old photos late into the night, and then he noticed something missed during the original trial. In every single crime scene photo of that dusty, hidden room, there were always two sets of footprints. Not one. The second set was much smaller. But Lily was accounted for when police searched the property. So whose prints were they? Evelyn was not like the other prisoners. While everyone else was hardened by the walls around them, Evelyn was consumed by them. She spent her days, not with idle chatter or plotting escape, but with a piece of charcoal and a roll of paper. She was drawing a map. Not just any map, but a perfect, to-scale blueprint of the entire prison. Every cell, every hallway, every guard tower. But there was one detail that baffled the warden. A small, square room in the basement, a room that didn't exist on any official plans. The warden wasn't the only one intrigued. Detective Miller, retired but still haunted by an old case, heard whispers of the prisoner's impossible map. Years ago, before the prison was renovated, he was investigating a string of disappearances. One rainy night, while surveying the old building's perimeter, he swore he saw something. A small hand, pressed against a grimy basement window. The image was gone in a flash, dismissed as a trick of the light, but it never truly left him. Now, hearing about Evelyn's drawing, the memory came rushing back. He arranged a visit. Evelyn sat across from him, her eyes vacant, her hands stained black with charcoal. Miller didn't waste time. He laid out the old case files, the photos of the missing girls. He pointed to one. Her, he said. Did you see her? Evelyn didn't respond. She just kept drawing, her charcoal scratching rhythmically. Miller leaned closer, his voice a desperate whisper. The hand in the window. I saw it. I know someone was down there. Suddenly, Evelyn stopped drawing. She looked up, her gaze piercing through Miller. She slid a new piece of paper across the table. It wasn't a map. It was a drawing of a little girl with a bright red ribbon in her hair, sitting in a dark, stone room. Below it, Evelyn had drawn herself, sitting on the other side of a wall, talking to the girl. Her visits. Her secret friend. The realization hit Miller like a physical blow. The hidden room was real. A tomb within the prison's foundation. He asked the warden to show him the basement. They went down, following Evelyn's map to a section of the wall that looked just like the rest. But Miller, driven by a decades-old instinct, pushed against the cold stone. With a grating sound, a section of the wall receded, revealing a dark, musty space. There was nothing inside but dust and a small, faded red ribbon lying on the floor. As they stood there in stunned silence, a strange sound echoed from above. A low, electronic hum, followed by a series of loud, metallic clicks. One after another, every lock in the prison was disengaging. Alarms blared as cell doors swung open. Panic erupted. Guards and prisoners scrambled in the ensuing chaos. Miller and the warden rushed back upstairs, but by the time they reached Evelyn's cell, it was empty. The charcoal and the drawings of the little girl were gone. All that remained was the master map of the prison, spread out on her cot. And in the center of the non-existent basement room, a new message was scrawled in charcoal. It's okay, it read. You can come upstairs now. Evelyn was gone, and no one ever saw her again. The night before the execution was silent. No shouting, no crying, no last-minute panic. Just silence. The hallway outside the death row cells glowed in dim yellow light. Guards walked slower than usual, their shoes soft against the floor. Even the heavy doors seemed to close gently, as if the prison itself understood something important was about to end. Inside her cell, Evelyn Hart sat on the bed. Her hands rested neatly in her lap. She was not shaking. She was not praying. She was waiting. But across the prison, Detective Sarah Cole was running. The folder in her hands shook as she pushed through security doors. "Warden Hale," she shouted. The old warden turned. His face was already tired. He had done this job for 30 years, and execution nights never got easier. "Detective," he said quietly. "It's late." Sarah dropped the folder onto the desk. "I need 10 minutes with her." Hale stared at the clock. "Execution is scheduled at sunrise." "I know," Sarah said. "But we were wrong about something." The room went still. Hale slowly picked up the papers. Photos, old hospital records, birth dates, and one handwritten note. His eyebrows tightened. "That's not possible." Sarah swallowed. "I think she was telling the truth." Hours earlier, midnight, Evelyn sat across from Officer Daniel Ruiz in the interview room. He wasn't assigned to talk to her, but she had asked for him. Not a priest, not a lawyer. Him. Daniel kept his hands folded. "You said you remembered something," he said. Evelyn nodded once. "I didn't lie about the second Lily." Daniel watched her carefully. "We found the room under your house. We found the bed, the chains, the drawings." "Yes. And we found no record of another child being born to you." Evelyn tilted her head slightly. "That's because she wasn't born to me." Daniel leaned forward. "Then whose child was she?" Evelyn looked straight into his eyes. "Mine first." He frowned. "That doesn't make sense." For the first time in the entire trial, Evelyn smiled. Not happily, but softly, like someone remembering a distant memory. "Detective Cole found the hospital, didn't she?" Daniel froze. He hadn't told her. No one had. Present, the warden's office. Hale lowered the paper slowly. The hospital was closed in 1989. A small private maternity center. Records mostly destroyed in a fire. Mostly. One surviving intake form. Mother, Evelyn Hart. Children, female twins. Hale whispered. "Twins," Sarah nodded. "They were separated." Years ago, Evelyn lay in a hospital bed. The ceiling fan turned slowly above her. A nurse held one baby. A doctor held the other. But the doctor did not bring the second child to her. Evelyn's voice was weak. Where is she?" The doctor smiled gently. "She didn't survive." But the nurse avoided eye contact. And Evelyn noticed. She always noticed. Back to present interview room. Daniel's voice shook. "You had twins." "Yes." "And someone took one." "Yes." He stared at her. "So the girl in the basement was my daughter." He stood up. "Then why hide her? Why keep her locked away? Why not go to police?" Evelyn's eyes softened. "I did." He stopped. "They told me I was confused from childbirth." Her fingers traced the table edge. "Years later I found her." Daniel felt cold. "Where?" "At a group home." He blinked. "You kidnapped your own child?" "No," her voice stayed calm. "I brought her home. Morning of the execution day." Detective Cole sat across from Evelyn now. The room felt heavier. "You raised two daughters," Sarah said quietly. "Yes. But only one could legally exist." Evelyn nodded. They had already given the other to a family. New name. New life. Sarah looked at her notes. "You believed if the state discovered her, they would take her again." "Yes." "So you hid her?" "Yes." Sarah's voice tightened. "Then why was she chained?" For the first time, Evelyn hesitated. Not fear. Not guilt. Something deeper. Because she was afraid of the outside world. Sarah frowned. "That's not enough." Evelyn looked down at her hands. She didn't understand time. Or people. She believed everyone would steal her away again. Sarah leaned forward. "That still doesn't explain the deaths." The room became silent. Evelyn's answer came softly. "They weren't meant to die." Sarah froze. Years ago, two neighbors argued outside the house. Voices raised. One woman pointed toward the basement window. "I heard a child crying." Another shouted, "We're calling the police." Inside, young Lily stood shaking. "Mom, they'll take her." The hidden girl rocked back and forth in panic. Hands over ears. Screaming. And then, a struggle. A push. A fall down the stairs. Silence. Back to present. Sarah's voice barely worked. "You're saying," Evelyn nodded. She reacted. "She thought they came to take her." Daniel whispered. "And you confessed." "Yes." "Why?" Evelyn finally looked tired. Because only one daughter could be saved. They would never understand her mind. They would only see a monster. Sarah's throat tightened. So you became one instead. Evelyn didn't answer. She didn't need to. Sunrise. The execution chamber doors opened. Witnesses sat behind the glass. The room hummed quietly with machines. Evelyn walked calmly. No struggle. No tears. She lay down and looked at the ceiling lights. Warden Hale spoke softly. Do you have final words? She turned her head slightly towards Sarah and Daniel behind the window. Yes. Her voice was gentle. Tell Lily she was always loved. A pause. And tell the other one. She is finally safe. The chemicals began to flow. Her breathing slowed, then stopped. Weeks later, Detective Cole closed the case file. Outside, sunlight warmed the courthouse steps. Daniel stood beside her. The surviving Lily moved away, he said. Sarah nodded. And the second girl? Daniel exhaled. She lives in a medical care home now. Quiet place. No bars. No chains. They stood silently. Do you think she was evil? Daniel asked. Sarah looked at the folder one last time. Inside were 2 birth certificates, finally printed. 2 names. 2 daughters. She closed it gently. No, she said. I think she chose to be blamed. The wind lifted the edge of the paperwork. And for the first time in decades, the case was at peace. Thanks for watching. Kindly like, comment, and subscribe for more crime documentary stories.